On a stormy night at a children's hospital, a powerful father stood in despair as he watched his only son lie barely breathing in the emergency room. Even the top doctors were helpless, unable to find the cause, forced to watch the boy grow weaker by the hour. When everything seemed hopeless, an elderly black cleaning woman stepped in and pointed out a gap in their diagnosis. But instead of listening, the department head belittled her, insulted her, and threw her out. None of them knew they had just driven away the only person who could save the child. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from. And subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. Rain hammered against the wide glass windows of St. Gabriel Medical Center. The pediatric ICU glowed under the sterile hum of fluorescent lights, cold blue, merciless. Luca Valenti, 8 years old, lay motionless on the hospital bed. His skin was flushed, his breathing shallow, heart racing at 180 beats per minute. A small red rash shimmered and disappeared on his neck, like it was teasing life and death. 12 doctors crowded around his chart. The air reeked of caffeine, latex, and fear. Dr. Charles Benton, mid-40s, tall, crisp, every inch of him polished to Harvard perfection, stood at the head of the group. The Rolex on his wrist caught the light each time he gestured at the monitor. Vitals unstable, he muttered, flipping through test results. Cultures negative, inflammatory markers inconclusive. A young resident tried to speak, voice trembling. Could this be infectious myocarditis? Benton didn't look up. Or maybe an alien flu doctor, please. Let's think before we guess. The others went quiet. No one wanted to challenge him. Outside the glass, Marco Valenti stood frozen, one hand pressed to the window. His tailored suit hung loose, now tie half undone, eyes bloodshot. The man who owned half the city looked small against the sterile white light. He barked into his phone. "Get me Dr. Winters in Boston, now. I don't care what time it is." Pause. His voice rose. "I said, wake him up. Tell him it's Marco Valenti. I'll pay whatever he asks." He ended the call, then dialed another. "Put me through to Director Reynolds. No, tell him it's urgent. My son is in ICU." "Yes, tonight." His hand trembled as he spoke. "Do something, damn it." Behind the glass, Luca's chest rose and fell too fast. The monitor beeped red again, a warning, a countdown. Marco's voice cracked. "Jesus Christ. What's happening in there?" A nurse opened the ICU door slightly. "He's still fighting, Mr. Valenti. The doctors are doing everything they can." "Everything." Marco stepped forward. "You've been saying that for 12 hours. Her lips pressed together, helpless. She didn't reply. Marco turned back to the glass, breath fogging the pain. "Luca, buddy," he whispered, voice trembling. "You hear me. You stay with me, okay? You don't leave me, not you." Inside, Benton gestured briskly. "Let's increase fluids, run another panel, and call for cardio consult." His tone was clipped, efficient, mechanical. A resident hesitated. "Sir, his heart rate's still at 180. I said increase fluids. We stabilize before we speculate." The nurse complied. Machines beeped louder. Luca's fingers twitched once weakly. Marco caught it through the glass and pressed his palm harder against the window. "That's it, son. That's it. I'm right here." The clock above the ICU door read 3:12 a.m. The second hand ticked forward, steady, cruel. Marco's phone buzzed again, another call, another promise that went nowhere. He hung up mid-sentence and slammed the phone against the wall. His voice was hoarse now. "What's the point of all this? The money, the power, the meetings, the deals, none of it means a damn thing if I can't save my kid." His knees nearly buckled, but he caught himself on the wall. He pressed both hands against the glass and whispered, barely audible, "Luca, don't you dare leave me. Please, please." The only reply was the steady, merciless beeping of the monitor inside, and the tick, tick, tick of the clock counting down a father's faith 1 second at a time. Althea Morgan pushed her cleaning cart slowly down the fluorescent-lit hallway. At 66, her back was slightly hunched, her silver hair tied in a small bun, glasses slipping down the bridge of her nose. She moved with the quiet familiarity of someone who had walked these halls for years, invisible to everyone except the floors she cleaned. As she approached the conference room, the door was half open. Voices leaked out, sharp, frustrated, impatient. Dr. Benton's voice cut through the noise. "None of these labs make sense. Someone bring me updated vitals." A resident rushed toward the ICU printer, nearly colliding with Althea. "Move, please. This area is for professionals." Althea stepped aside silently, but her eyes drifted to the sheet he carried. Temperature chart, rash progression, heart rate spikes. Her heart dropped. "Oh, Lord. No, Not again, she whispered. She froze, staring at the sheet. Fever spikes every 6 hours. Rash disappears and returns. Tachycardia. Conjunctival irritation noted at 1:40 a.m. It was all there. A pattern she knew by heart. A pattern she had once taught interns to look for. A pattern that had saved lives. Kawasaki. Incomplete presentation. Dear God, why weren't they seeing it? She swallowed hard, then pushed her cart closer to the doorway. Inside, 12 doctors clustered around a table littered with printouts. Bent and paced like a frustrated king denied answers. Could this be Tox syndrome, Miss C, something exotic? Their voices layered on top of each other, but none of them said the word she knew. Althea cleared her throat gently. Excuse me. Sirs, ma'ams. The fever pattern she didn't even finish. The room erupted in laughter. A resident snorted. No way. The janitor wants to give a differential, another whispered loudly. Maybe she binged Grey's Anatomy. Benton didn't laugh. He stepped forward with icy disdain. His Rolex caught the ceiling light as he pointed at her. Who let her linger here? Remove her. Now. 2 security officers approached instantly. Come on, Miss Morgan, the first guard said softly, embarrassed for her. You know the rules. A resident added, this is a restricted medical consult. Stick to mops, please. The words stung like hot needles. As they guided her out, Althea's eyes flicked to the glass wall of the ICU. She saw Luca's small, chest-heaving skin, pale lips cracked. His tiny hand twitched the same way another boy's hand had twitched in her memory decades ago. A boy she had saved. A boy with the same symptoms. Her throat tightened. The guards let go of her once she was in the hallway. She stood still, one hand gripping the metal edge of her cleaning cart. Her knuckles turned white. Her mind whispered, they're wrong. They're blind. That child is slipping away, and I can see exactly what's killing him. A rush of old ghosts surged back the hospital in Baltimore, her white coat, her students the babies she had pulled back from the brink, and the day everything was taken from her. She blinked hard. Not now. A child needed her. Her cleaning cart rattled as she steadied herself. Her heartbeat thudded painfully in her ears. Tears welled, but she didn't let them fall. No, she murmured under her breath, I'm not walking away. Not from this. Not from him. She turned toward the ICU hall the same direction Marco was standing in, helpless and cracking apart. A decision settled in her bones. If the doctors wouldn't hear her, the father would. The hallway outside the pediatric ICU was painfully quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed against the ears until every breath sounded too loud. Althea Morgan stood there with her cleaning cart in front of her fingers, curled so tightly around the handle that her knuckles lost their color. Her chest rose in short, shaky breaths. The humiliation from minutes earlier still burned under her skin. Her cheeks were warm, and her throat felt thick, as if her body refused to swallow the shame forced down her by a room full of doctors who did not see her as anything but a woman with a mop. She closed her eyes for a moment. Do not break Althea, not now. That boy is dying in there. Do not walk away. When she opened her eyes again, Marco Valenti was still inside the ICU, his body hunched over his son. He was speaking to Luca softly, though no one could hear the exact words. His hand stroked the boy's hair in small, shaky motions. His shoulders trembled. That sight alone made something old and painful rise in Althea's chest, the instinct to protect the instinct that had not died, no matter how much the world tried to bury it. She inhaled deeply. Her decision was already made. She turned toward him. Halfway down the hallway, a resident stepped out of the conference room with a stack of papers in his hand. His coat swayed as he stopped abruptly in front of her. His eyes took one quick look at her cart, then at her, and his face twisted in impatience. Please move, he said. This area is for people with real training. He did not even wait for her to shift. He nudged the edge of her cleaning cart with his knee, pushing it aside, like it was nothing but a rolling trash bin blocking his path. The metal rattled loudly. Althea's jaw tightened. Her heartbeat jumped. She felt the sting, not the physical one, but the one that reminded her she had once stood where he stood, wearing a lab coat he had not earned, yet making decisions he could not even understand. She had once been the person others moved out of the way for. Now she was the person being pushed. She steadied the cart, gently refusing to let it tip. I apologize, she murmured, though the words tasted bitter. The resident scoffed. Just do not get in the way again. He stepped past her without another glance. Something inside her snapped into place, not anger, but resolve. The quiet, firm kind that came from knowing you had truth on your side, even if no one believed you yet. She reached into the side pocket of her cleaning apron. Her fingers brushed the familiar leather case. She pulled it out slowly, almost ceremonially. A faded brown pouch, edges worn, zippers slightly loose. She placed it on top of the cleaning cart and unzipped it. Inside lay the stethoscope. It was old. The tubing had lost some of its shine, and the metal felt cool under her fingertips. But she had polished the chest piece just the night before. She always polished it, not for the world, for herself. A reminder of the life she once lived. Beside the stethoscope was a thick stack of papers folded neatly, old case notes, printouts faded from time, margins filled with handwriting, her handwriting dense tight filled with arrows and circles, words underlined twice, sometimes 3 times. She gently lifted the first page. The top line read in bold marker, atypical Kawasaki patterns easy to miss. Do not overlook. Her throat tightened again. She gathered the file under her arm, lifted the stethoscope carefully, and stepped forward. She approached the doorway of the conference room again. The doctors were still inside, voices layered on top of each other, throwing around words like myocarditis, sepsis, autoimmune, and rare infection, but none of them sounded sure. Their voices were sharp from stress, not clarity. Dr. Benton stood tall at the head of the group, flipping through papers with exaggerated frustration. Althea stepped into view. One of the younger residents noticed her first. His eyebrows shot up in disbelief. Seriously again, he muttered. Benton turned, and the moment he saw her, his expression hardened into a cold wall. "What now?" he asked. "Did someone forget to escort you back to maintenance?" Althea didn't flinch this time. "I need to speak with Mr. Valenti." Benton let out a sharp laugh, quick and cruel. "And say what? Teach him something you learned from late-night medical dramas." A couple of doctors chuckled. Althea didn't smile. She didn't back down. She touched the stethoscope in her hand. "No, I learned from children I treated. Children who lived because I did not ignore what was right in front of me." Her voice was soft but firm enough to make the room pause for half a breath. Benton raised an eyebrow. "You expect us to believe you treated anyone, you clean floors." Althea looked him in the eye, neither aggressive nor scared. "I clean floors now. That is true. But what is also true is that I have seen a case exactly like this. Fever that comes and goes in cycles. Rash that fades too quickly. Eyes irritated without discharge. One-sided neck swelling. A heart rate stuck dangerously high." She held up her file. "I saw this once in Baltimore. I saved that boy because his doctors dismissed what did not fit a textbook. And I see the same mistake happening here." Silence fell. No one spoke for several seconds. Even the steady beeping from the ICU monitor felt louder, like the machines themselves were listening. Someone shifted uncomfortably. "Please," she said quietly, "just look at the pattern." Benton narrowed his eyes. "You are overstepping." She didn't flinch. "I am trying to save a child." For the first time, Benton's facade cracked just slightly, not with humility, but with irritation. "We have real physicians working on this. We do not need a custodian claiming she is an expert." Althea's jaw tensed. She pressed the edge of the file lightly against her chest, as if grounding herself. "I am not claiming anything. I am telling you something you are refusing to see." More silence. A long, slow breath left her lungs. She turned away. The insult lingered in the air, but something else lingered too, an aftertaste of doubt, the kind that stuck in the throat. As she stepped into the hallway, a breeze from the air vent blew across the pages in her file. A few sheets slipped free and landed on the floor. One page floated farther than the others. Marco, stepping out of the ICU room to catch his breath, stopped when he saw a paper slide to his feet. He bent to pick it up. He froze. Across the top of the page, handwritten in bold strokes, were the words, "Save the child." He lifted his head. Althea was already gathering the fallen pages, her breathing uneven. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't hide it. She didn't hide anything anymore. Marco stared at her, not at her uniform, not at her cleaning cart, at her eyes. There was something in them that he hadn't seen in any doctor tonight, something fierce, something steady, something that did not belong to a janitor. He took a slow step toward her. She felt his presence before she saw him, and when she looked up, their eyes met. His were bloodshot from crying, but sharp with something new, curiosity, maybe hope, maybe desperation. He held out the page to her. "What is this?" he asked. His voice wasn't commanding this time. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even suspicious. It was searching. Althea swallowed, suddenly aware that her heart was thudding hard inside her chest. This, she whispered, is what your doctors are missing. She clutched the file to her chest. The stethoscope glinted under the fluorescent lights, casting a small, bright reflection on the floor. Marco's eyes followed the light. When he looked back at her, something had shifted. He wasn't looking at a woman who mopped hallways. He was looking at someone who might give him the one thing no one else could: a chance. For the first time that night, Marco straightened his posture, wiped the back of his hand across his face, and spoke with a low, steady voice. "Tell me," he said. "Tell me what you see." And that was the moment everything changed. Not for the doctors, not for the hospital, but for Marco Valenti, a man who finally realized that the person others ignored might be the only person who could save his son. Marco Valenti stood in the hallway like a man carved out of stone. His eyes were locked on the paper he had just handed back to Althea, the words "save the child" still echoing in his mind. He felt his pulse in his throat heavy and uneven, as if his body already understood something his mind had not caught up to yet. He looked at her hands first. They were steady now, resting on top of the thick file she carried. Then he looked at her face, the deep lines of age, the exhaustion, the quiet strength that had not cracked even after the humiliation she had just suffered. Her chest rose and fell with slow, intentional breaths. She looked like someone fighting her own trembling, but refusing to let the world see it. And despite everything, she still stood tall. Marco swallowed hard and spoke with a low voice that carried both disbelief and hope. "You said they are missing something." Althea nodded once firm. "Yes. What is it?" His voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat and tried again. "What are they not seeing?" Althea tightened her grip on the file. Her nails pressed into the cardboard, leaving faint marks. She took one small step closer to him, careful not to make abrupt movements, as if she knew he was hanging on to the last strand of hope he had left. "I know what your son has," she said softly, but the certainty in her tone made the air shift. Marco blinked. His breath caught in his chest. "Say it." "Kawasaki," she said. "Atypical Kawasaki disease." His eyes narrowed, trying to sort through the word he had never heard before. "Kawasaki, what is that?" She took a deep breath, steadying her voice. "It is an inflammatory disease that targets the blood vessels, especially the coronary arteries. Children can die if it is not treated quickly." Marco's shoulders tensed. A small tremor ran through his left hand. "Jesus." He rubbed his forehead. "How do you know?" "What makes you so sure?" Althea lifted the file so he could see the first page. Her handwriting covered the margins like a map of urgency. She spoke clearly, each word clipped and precise. "Because your son has every sign of it. The fever that goes up and down in waves. The rash that appears and disappears. The red eyes without discharge. The swollen lymph node on one side of his neck. And the tongue. I saw it through the glass earlier. Bright red with enlarged papillae. We call it a strawberry tongue." Marco stared at her. His breathing became uneven again. "Those symptoms, are you certain they mean what you think they mean?" She nodded slowly. "I am." Marco glanced back at the ICU. Luca's small body lay under the fluorescent glow chest, rising weakly skin pale, except for patches of fading red on his neck. His little hand twitched again just once, but enough to pull a gasp from Marco's throat. "Good God," he whispered. Althea watched him with sympathy, but there was no softness in her certainty. "I have seen this before. I treated it before. Children just like your son." He turned back to her sharply. "But the doctors said they checked everything. They said nothing fits." "They checked for the wrong things," she answered. Her voice held no malice, only truth. "They are looking for infections. They are looking for common patterns. Kawasaki does not always show itself the same way. Atypical cases fool even good doctors." Marco stepped closer to her. His face was so close that she could see the redness around his eyes and the way his jaw kept clenching. "If you are wrong," he said quietly, "and I push them to follow your lead, my son could lose time he doesn't have." Althea held his gaze. Her own heartbeat thumped hard beneath her ribs, but she did not let it waver her words. "If I am wrong, I will disappear. Forever. You will never see me again. I will take responsibility for interfering." Marco stiffened. "You would just walk away." "Yes," she said, "because then I truly would have failed him." He stared at her for several seconds, stunned by the boldness of her promise. Her voice softened. "But if I am right, and I believe with everything in me that I am, you will save him. Because there is a treatment, but it must be started soon." Something shifted in Marco's face, a small crack in his fear letting in a tiny thread of light. "What treatment?" he asked. Althea opened her file and pointed to a page. Intravenous immunoglobulin, 2 grams per kilogram of body weight, aspirin in high doses, and an echocardiogram to check the coronary arteries immediately. Marco stared at the words, his lips parting slightly. He ran a hand through his hair, tugging at it, as if trying to steady himself. Jesus, you sound more certain than the entire team in that room. She nodded once. Because I have seen this pattern, and because I know that look in your son's eyes. Children with Kawasaki look like they are fading under the fever. He is fading Mr. Valenti. His chest tightened painfully. He took a step back, then forward again, as if his body did not know where to land. He looked at her file, at her stethoscope, at her trembling hands, and finally back to her eyes. Her eyes did not tremble. They held the weight of experience loss and a stubborn, unbreakable will. "Why should I trust you?" he asked. Her answer was immediate. "Because your son is out of time, and because no one else has an answer." His breath hitched again. Silence hung between them, heavy and charged. The hallway felt too quiet, too still. The only sound was the distant beep of Luca's monitor, steady but fragile. Marco looked down at his hands. They trembled. Then he lifted his head again. What he saw in Althea's eyes was not desperation, nor ego, nor fear. It was truth. He inhaled sharply, and the breath came out shaky. "You have 5 minutes," he said. Althea blinked, stunned. 5 minutes to tell them everything you just told me." He pointed toward the conference room. "You give them your diagnosis, your plan, your evidence, and I will make sure they listen." Althea felt her throat tighten. Relief washed through her. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet release of tension. She had held too long. She nodded. "All right." Marco stepped past her with purpose, now wiping his eyes once with the back of his hand as he moved. "Stay close." He stopped in front of the heavy steel door of Conference Room B. The doctors were still inside discussing Luca's case with rising panic. Benton's voice carried through the door, sharp and impatient. Marco reached into his jacket and pulled out his hospital authorization badge. The badge glinted under the hallway lights. He swiped it through the card reader. A small green LED flashed on a soft click, echoed in the silence. The sound felt like a shift in the world. Marco placed his hand on the door. His voice was steady for the first time all night. "From this moment on, they do not get to ignore you." He pushed the door open. Warm light from the room spilled into the hallway, washing over Althea's face and the stethoscope she held tightly in her hand. The shift from the cold fluorescent hallway to the warmer room was subtle, but enough to make her exhale slowly, quietly. She adjusted her glasses. She swallowed the tremor in her throat. She gripped the file of handwritten notes, the file she had guarded for decades. Then she stepped forward. Marco held the door for her, his expression firm, expectant, ready for a fight. She entered the room like a soldier stepping onto a battlefield, her posture straight, her breathing controlled, the stethoscope glinting in her grasp, like a piece of her old identity breaking through the surface. Behind her, the door closed with a heavy thud. For the first time in a very long time, the world was going to listen to her. And somewhere behind the glass of the ICU, a small boy named Luca had 5 more minutes of hope. Marco did not hesitate when he pushed the heavy door open. The metal hinges groaned, and the dozen doctors inside turned at once. Their faces reflected irritation, surprise, and exhaustion. Clipboards froze midair. Pens stopped moving. Dr. Charles Benton stood at the head of the table with his arms locked against his chest, and his expression tightened the instant he saw Marco stride in with Althea behind him. Marco's voice cut through the room. It was deep, raw, and furious. "This meeting is over. All of you will listen to her." A ripple of shock moved across the room. Chairs shifted. A bottle of hand sanitizer clattered. A young resident blinked rapidly, as if he misheard. Benton stepped forward, jaw clenched. "Excuse me. Are you out of your mind?" He pointed at Althea with a stiff, trembling hand. "She is a custodian, a janitor. You expect us to take medical advice from her." Marco took one step closer, lowering his tone but sharpening every word. "I expect you to shut up and listen. That is what I expect." A heavy silence fell. No one moved. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead. Althea stood just inside the doorway, her hands gripping the folder of notes tightly against her chest. Her pulse pounded in her ears, but her posture remained steady. She had waited years for a moment like this. She inhaled calmly and stepped forward, moving beside Marco. Benton scoffed. "This is ridiculous. The hospital has protocols. We cannot entertain Marco. Cut him off. My son is dying while all of you argue with each other. She has something to say, and you will hear her. Dr. Priya Shah, the head of pediatric cardiology, sat near the middle of the long table. She watched quietly, her eyes narrowed not in anger, but in analysis. She studied Althea's stance, her expression, the way she held the file. Priya did not interrupt. Benton threw his hands up. Fine, let's entertain this disaster. Go ahead then. He leaned back, folding his arms tightly. Tell us what we, the attending physicians, have somehow missed. Althea stepped closer to the long conference table. The projector screen behind them still displayed Luca's lab's fever patterns, blood counts, imaging results. The words, possible myocarditis, were scribbled in yellow highlight. She spoke in a low, calm tone. You are treating symptoms one at a time. Fever here, rash there, heart rate over there. But none of you are looking at the full picture. A few residents shifted in their seats. One of them whispered, "She's bold." Benton rolled his eyes. All right then, enlighten us. What is the full picture? He tilted his head mockingly. And before you speak, do tell us where you studied medicine. Was it late-night television, online quizzes? Marco's hands curled into fists. Althea did not react. Her voice stayed level. You are missing the diagnosis because you expect it to look perfect. Kawasaki disease rarely looks perfect. Atypical cases are harder to catch. The room stiffened. Several doctors exchanged uncertain glances. Benton stepped forward, his voice sharp. Kawasaki impossible. He does not meet the full criteria. Althea nodded once, not the textbook ones, but the critical ones. Yes, he does. She raised a page from her file and placed it on the table. Here, look. Dr. Priya Shah leaned in slightly. Althea continued. Fluctuating fever that spikes and drops repeatedly. Transient rash. Conjunctival redness without discharge. Unilateral cervical lymph node swelling. Strawberry tongue. Persistent tachycardia. A resident frowned, but the labs were inconclusive. That is exactly why it is atypical, Althea replied softly. Benton let out a sharp laugh. You can list symptoms all day. It means nothing if you do not understand the core danger. He smirked and leaned forward, his voice dripping with condescension. Why do you not tell us the primary life-threatening complication of Kawasaki just for fun? Marco exhaled slowly, bracing himself. Althea looked Benton directly in the eye. Coronary artery aneurysm. The room froze. She added her tone, unwavering. Left untreated, 1/4 of children will die. A pen fell from someone's hand. A Mont Blanc pen. It rolled across the polished table and stopped against Benton's wrist. The silence was instant and absolute. Benton's face drained of color. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. Dr. Priya Shah leaned forward, speaking for the first time. Her voice was controlled, but the seriousness in it cut through the room. What did you say? Althea turned to her gently. 25% mortality without intervention. If he has coronary artery involvement already, time is running out. Priya stared at Luca's vitals on the screen again, her heart thudding. Her mind replayed the elevated heart rate, the inconsistent fever, the unusual rash patterns. Althea opened her folder and placed more documents on the table, old case notes, medical guidelines, handwritten patterns circled in red ink. Your window is closing. You need an echo now. You may already see dilation. Benton recovered enough to straighten up. This is outrageous. We are not performing a major diagnostic procedure based on the opinion of Priya. Cut him off with a sharp tone rarely heard from her. Stop talking. Benton froze, stunned. Priya rose from her chair. She is not wrong. She pointed to the screen. Look at the fever pattern. Look at the heart rate. Look at the node swelling. We should have performed an echo 6 hours ago. A resident whispered, "Oh my God." Priya turned to Althea. What treatment would you recommend if the echo shows involvement IVIG? 2 grams per kilogram. High-dose aspirin. Immediately. Her voice was steady, authoritative. And prepare for possible steroid rescue if he doesn't respond. Priya nodded slowly. Yes, those are correct. Benton, unable to regain control, slammed his hands on the table. This is insane. You are taking treatment recommendations from a janitor. Marco stepped forward, his voice cutting like a blade. You are taking them from the only person in this room who has given me a straight answer all night. Benton stuttered. Mr. Valenti, you cannot, I can. Marco's face was red with rage. My son's life does not belong to your ego. He stepped closer until he and Benton were inches apart. You have had half a day to save him. You have nothing. She has something. I am listening to her. Benton took a shaky breath, but his confidence had slipped. Marco turned to Priya. His voice lowered into something raw and pleading. "Do the echo." Priya held his gaze. "I agree. It needs to be done." Marco nodded firmly, turning back to the others. "I am taking responsibility." "Do what she says." The room erupted into motion. Chairs slid back. Residents scrambled. Priya grabbed her tablet. Nurses hurried toward the door. Althea remained still for a moment, her heart thumping inside her chest, her knees weak with the weight of what had just happened. She felt Marco's hand gently land on her shoulder, steady, grateful, full of hope she had not expected from him. She looked around. The projector screen now displayed the words highlighted in bold blue Kawasaki Diagnostic Constellation. The fluorescent light above flickered once, then steadied, casting a faint silver reflection across her glasses, her stethoscope, her worn file, all the tools she had hidden for too many years. Finally, after a lifetime of being dismissed, her words were moving people. Her knowledge was saving someone. And for the first time in a very long time, Althea allowed herself to breathe. Her battle was not over. But she had won this round, not with power, not with position, but with truth. The hallway outside the echocardiography suite felt unnaturally still. It was the kind of stillness that made every breath echo inside the chest. Marco stood just beyond the double doors, hands pressed against the cool glass panel, staring at the dim room where his son now lay beneath a large monitor. His heart beat hard, slow, and uneven, as if matching Luca's fragile rhythm inside that machine. Inside the echo room, the lights were dimmed. A single lamp glowed in the corner, casting a soft pool of warmth that barely reached the floor. Everything else was shadows and screens. The only sounds were the faint hum of the machine warming up, the subtle click of a keyboard, and the shallow breaths of the medical team as they waited. Dr. Priya Shah stood at the bedside, rolling up the sleeves of her white coat. Her face was calm, but the tension in her jaw gave away the pressure she felt. She removed her rings, placed them carefully on the counter, and pulled on a new pair of gloves. The gel bottle snapped open, and the cold gel dripped onto the transducer. "Okay, Luca," she said softly, as if speaking to a sleeping child might somehow ease his pain. "This will be quick, sweetheart." She positioned the probe against the left side of his chest with steady hands. The echo screen blinked to life. Lines, waves, a rhythmic motion, beating, contracting, expanding. The room held its breath. Althea stood near the wall, hands clasped in front of her. She tried to stay out of the way, but the weight of the moment pressed heavily on her chest. Her eyes did not blink as she watched every shift of the grayscale image. Dr. Benton stood near the foot of the bed, arms tightly folded, jaw clenched. His face had turned pale, and even though he tried not to show it, the slight tremor in one hand betrayed him. This was the test. He didn't want to see the test that could prove every certainty he clung to wrong. The probe moved slightly. A section of the heart appeared sharper, the edges clearer. Priya narrowed her eyes. "Hold on. Let me change the angle." She shifted the probe just a little, pressing down more firmly. She froze. A soft gasp escaped the throat of a resident. The coronary artery came into view, specifically the left anterior descending artery, the LAD. Priya leaned in. "No." The artery's outline appeared on the screen. The walls slightly expanded, the lumen wider than it should be. It pulsed irregularly, the dilation undeniable. Priya's voice cracked not from fear, but from certainty. "Kawasaki." She swallowed. "She's right. This is Kawasaki disease." Another resident whispered under their breath, "Jesus." She nailed it. The room fell silent, unbearably silent. The only sound was the faint swooshing noise of the Doppler flow as red and blue waves danced over the artery. Z-score data populated in the bottom corner of the screen. Greater than 2. A diagnostic threshold. A 3-second pause filled the room, long, heavy, and unforgettable. Dr. Benton's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. His Adam's apple moved slowly as he swallowed hard. His knees seemed to soften under him, and he reached for the counter to steady himself. His voice finally emerged in a hoarse whisper. "No, it can't be." But the screen didn't lie. Priya looked at him, then back at the monitor. "It is," she said. "He has coronary involvement. We should have checked earlier." Althea stepped forward slightly. Her voice was soft but firm. "Do not waste another minute." Everyone turned toward her. There was no arrogance in her tone, no gloating. No satisfaction from proving them wrong. Only urgency. Life or death urgency. "We have the evidence," she said. "Start IVIG immediately. High-dose aspirin. The longer you wait, the more the vessel walls weaken." Priya nodded without hesitation. She's absolutely right. A nurse rushed toward the door. I'll prep the medication. Another nurse followed. I'll alert pharmacy. Althea remained still, watching the room burst into motion. Benton's face stayed frozen, eyes locked on the screen. His voice was barely audible. I should have seen it. I should have caught it. Althea looked at him, her expression neutral. You were looking for what you expected, but diseases do not always play by rules. He didn't respond. Inside the echo room, Luca lay quietly unaware that his life had just taken a sharp turn toward hope. Priya wiped the gel from his chest, pulled off her gloves, and turned to the team. Prep the IV, double-check dosages, and get the aspirin ready now. Outside the glass, Marco watched the chaotic movement in the room. Doctors moving fast, nurses whispering orders, screens flashing. He pressed his forehead against the glass, breath fogging a small circle in front of him. What's happening? He asked aloud, even though no one outside the room could hear him. Inside, Priya stepped out to speak to him. She opened the door slowly, her expression a mix of exhaustion, disbelief, and relief. Mr. Valenti, she said gently. Marco straightened his voice, barely a whisper. Tell me. Priya nodded. She was right. Marco blinked. Kawasaki. Yes, Priya confirmed. Your son has coronary artery dilation. It's early, but it is there. We're starting treatment immediately. Marco's knees wobbled. His hand flew to his mouth. His chest rose with a shaky inhale, then fell in a tremor. Oh God. Thank you. Thank you. He pressed a palm against the glass again, watching them hook up the IV line, watching his son's still too fast breathing, watching hope return to the room. Inside, Althea stood quietly near the back wall. She didn't step forward. She didn't take credit. She didn't try to insert herself into the flurry of medical activity. She simply watched as the team moved with new purpose. Priya stepped to her and spoke in a low voice filled with genuine respect. I don't know how you recognized it so fast. Althea lowered her eyes. I learned the hard way a long time ago that flu-like symptoms can be deadly if you don't look at the whole picture. Priya nodded slowly, her gaze drifting back to the echo still frozen on the screen. Well, you saved him. For the first time since entering the room, Althea allowed herself a small, quiet breath. Not a sigh of relief, just a release of pressure. She had been holding the truth in her chest since the moment she saw the boy through the ICU window. Now that truth had a face on a screen. Benton stepped closer, staring at the echo image. His eyes glistened, not tears exactly, but something dangerously close. He clenched his jaw. I missed it, he muttered. I really missed it. Althea didn't answer. She didn't need to. The echo had spoken louder than any argument in the conference room. Marco watched as the nurses administered the IVIG slowly and cautiously, his hand pressed against the glass palm, trembling with every beep of the machine. He whispered to himself, Fight Luca. Stay with me, please. Inside, Priya adjusted the drip rate. We'll start slow, she said. Make sure he tolerates it. Then we increase. A nurse nodded. Vital signs stable for now. Another whispered, God, I can't believe this. She really saw it before all of us. Priya replied softly, experience comes in many forms. Althea stayed near the corner. Her eyes moved from the echo screen to Luca's small form, then to Marco, whose face had softened with cautious hope. For the first time that night, he looked like a father being pulled back from the edge. The echo machine continued to hum. The image on the screen remained frozen, a slightly widened coronary artery pulsing with the stubborn resilience of a child fighting for his life. No metaphor, no embellishment. Just truth. Althea finally exhaled, steady, controlled grounding herself. She touched the stethoscope around her neck, brushing her thumb along the cool metal, letting its weight remind her who she really was. And then she whispered softly, barely audible, but certain, we're not too late. The ICU felt different after the echocardiogram. Hope had entered the room quiet but real, and everyone could feel it. The IVIG infusion ran slowly into Luca's small arm drop by drop, while the soft flicker of the monitor lights created a rhythm that almost resembled calm. But calm never lasts in a place built for emergencies. The first 2 hours passed with the team checking vitals every few minutes. Priya hovered near the infusion pump, adjusting the rate with the caution of someone who understood exactly how delicate this treatment was. Benton stood behind her, unusually quiet, watching every number and waveform as if trying to redeem himself through vigilance. Althea remained standing near the corner, her posture straight, her eyes steady on Luca. She didn't speak, didn't interfere. She only watched her mind, calculating, remembering, preparing. She knew treatment was never a straight line. She knew storms often came right when people began to relax. Marco stood outside the glass palms, pressed against it, eyes locked on his son. His lips moved in a silent prayer. His chest rose and fell with unsteady breaths. Every few seconds he whispered, "Please, please God, please." Inside, the team worked under dim lights. Then it happened. A sharp alarm sliced through the room, shrill, violent, and unmistakably wrong. The monitor flashed angry red, heart rate skyrocketing, blood pressure collapsing, oxygen saturation dropping. The pump beeped frantically as if warning them of danger approaching fast. Priya's eyes widened. "Stop the infusion." A nurse lunged forward and slammed the stop button. The IVIG drip froze mid-line. "His pressure is falling," another nurse shouted. "Severe hypotension. His heart rate is climbing 170, 180. Benton pushed forward, face pale. "This is anaphylaxis. Get epinephrine." "No," Althea's voice cut through the panic like a blade. Everyone turned toward her. She stepped out of the shadows and into the bright emergency lights, her face illuminated in red pulses from the alarm panel. She moved slowly, but with absolute certainty, like someone who had lived this moment before. Her voice was firm. "This is not an allergic reaction." Priya looked at her sharply. "Then what is it?" "Acute hemolysis," Althea said. "It is from the infusion rate. His red cells are breaking down. His body is rejecting the immunoglobulin because it was increased too quickly." Benton shook his head. "That doesn't make sense." "It makes perfect sense," Althea snapped. "Look at his urine output. Look at the color change. Look at the blood pressure drop and the arrhythmia pattern. This is textbook hemolysis." Priya's head whipped toward the monitor. Her eyes flickered with recognition. "God, she's right. The signs match." Althea didn't waste another second. Her voice dropped into a deeper, commanding tone, calm enough to guide, powerful enough to override fear. "Switch protocols, now." "What protocol?" a resident asked, trembling. Althea stepped closer to the bedside, raising her voice over the alarms. "Methylprednisolone, 30 milligrams per kilogram per day. For 3 days." A nurse blinked. 3 days high-dose steroid therapy, yes, Althea said, and start dopamine. 5 micrograms per kilogram per minute. His cardiac output is crashing. His vessels are dilating too fast. He needs hemodynamic support immediately. Priya didn't hesitate. "You heard her. Move." Nurses rushed around the bed, hands flying across buttons and tubing. One grabbed the steroid vial from the emergency drawer. Another adjusted the IV lines. The infusion pump beeped in protest as settings were rapidly switched. Benton stared stunned at how quickly the situation had changed. This is dangerous. "It's more dangerous to do nothing," Priya snapped. "But we don't have evidence we have a dying child," she fired back. The red emergency lights strobed across the room, casting sharp angles of shadow along the walls and onto frightened faces. The sound of machines had become chaotic alarms, rushing footsteps, clicking pumps, the hiss of oxygen. Marco's heart seemed to stop completely. His forehead pressed harder against the glass. "Please. Oh God, please." His voice cracked, trembling as he squeezed the rosary in his fist. His hands shook so violently the beads slipped between his fingers. Inside the room, a nurse called out, "Steroids ready, dopamine primed." Priya turned to Althea. "Confirm the dose one more time." Althea nodded steadily. 30 milligrams per kilogram per day. Continue for 3 days. He will stabilize if we support him long enough. Priya didn't question her again. "Administer it," she ordered. A syringe connected to Luca's IV line. The pump beeped steadily as the dose entered his system. Another nurse started the dopamine drip, the electronic pump making sharp clicking sounds as it calibrated the rate. Click, click, click. The sound was maddeningly slow, like time dragging its feet when every second mattered. Luca's monitor still blared warnings, heart rate soaring, blood pressure, unstable oxygen dipping. Priya leaned over the bed. "Come on, Luca, stay with us. Stay with us, baby." The boy's small chest rose with shallow breaths, each one weaker than the last. Benton's voice cracked. "He's not responding." Althea turned to him, her eyes burning with the fire she had kept buried for decades. "Give it a minute." There was silence. Only alarms. Only chaos. Marco pressed his hands together, shaking violently, whispering faster and faster. "Please, please, please. Take me instead. Not him." Inside, Priya watched the monitor, breath held tight in her chest. 1 second, 2 seconds, 5. The line still spiked irregularly. Althea leaned over Luca, her voice a whisper only he could hear. "It's okay, sweetheart. Your body is just scared, but we're right here. We know what to do. You hold on. 10 seconds passed. The heart rate began to fall. Slowly. Not enough, but lower. 170. 165. Blood pressure nudged upward. A nurse gasped. "It's working." Priya exhaled in relief so deep it seemed to come from her bones. "Keep the rate steady." Marco saw the shift in the room through the glass and dropped his head, tears falling. "Thank you. Thank you." But Althea didn't move. She stayed right where she was, eyes locked on the monitor body, tight with focus. She knew how unpredictable crises were. She'd seen children swing between life and death within minutes. She wouldn't celebrate early, not when Luca's muscles twitched with each heartbeat, not when the sweat on his forehead glistened under emergency lights. Benton approached her slowly, his voice hollow. "How did you know? How could you be that sure?" She didn't look at him. "I've treated children with this exact complication before. If you go too fast, the body breaks its own blood cells trying to fight the infusion. Steroids calm that storm. Dopamine buys time." He swallowed hard. I should have known." Althea finally glanced at him, her expression tired but firm. "Then learn from it. That's what medicine is supposed to be. Learning, not ego." Benton dropped his gaze. Inside the room, the emergency lights slowly dimmed as the alarm softened. Vital signs steadied enough for the nurses to breathe again. Marco slid down the wall outside, covering his face with both hands, sobbing from sheer relief. His shoulders shook with every exhale. Priya turned to Althea. "We'll keep adjusting. We'll monitor him minute by minute." Althea nodded. "Good. That's exactly what he needs." She stepped back into the shadowed corner, finally allowing herself a long, slow breath. Her hands trembled slightly only now, revealing the fear she hid during the crisis. She clasped them together, grounding herself, letting the adrenaline ease. In the dim room, Luca looked small and fragile, but his monitors began to settle into steadier patterns. His chest rose a little easier. For the first time since the alarm sounded, the air felt breathable again. Marco pressed his hand to the glass, whispering through tears, "Fight, son. Just fight." And inside, under red lights fading to steady white, Althea whispered the same thing to herself. "He's not done yet." 90 minutes later, the ICU did not feel like the same room. The red emergency lights were off. The alarms were quiet. The monitors still hummed, but the tone had changed. The frantic rhythm had softened into something steady, something almost calm. Luca lay on the bed, smaller than ever, under the white blanket, but his chest rose in slow, even breaths now. The angry red flush on his skin had faded. A thin sheen of sweat still covered his forehead, but his face no longer looked twisted with pain. The storm inside his body was finally easing. On the monitor above him, his heart rate hovered at 95 beats a minute. Not perfect, but human, manageable, controlled. Priya stood on his left side, one hand resting lightly on the rail of the bed, the other holding a clipboard she had not written on for a while. She kept glancing from Luca's face to the monitor and back again, as if she did not quite trust the numbers yet. Her breathing matched the beeping, slow and focused. Althea was on the other side near Luca's feet. Her hands were laced together in front of her. Her shoulders had dropped just a little from where they had been earlier, no longer tight, and braced for disaster. Her eyes were tired but alert. She watched the boy's chest rise and fall, as if each breath were a small miracle. Benton stood a few steps back near the counter. He was not commanding anymore. His arms were not folded in superiority. They hung loose at his sides. His shoulders slumped. His gaze was fixed on the monitor, and his face looked older than it had at the beginning of the night. The weight of what almost happened sat heavy on him. Outside the glass, Marco had not moved far. He still stood pressed close to the window, but now his hands were not slamming or shaking with rage. One palm rested flat against the glass, the other held a plastic cup of water he had picked up, without thinking, from the small table behind him. The water inside trembled just slightly as his fingers shook. Inside the room, a nurse announced softly, "Heart rate holding in the 90s. Blood pressure is improving. Oxygen is good." Priya nodded, her voice low. "Keep an eye on him. But this is much better." The nurse exhaled, shoulders dropping. Thank God. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then, in the middle of that quiet, Luca's eyelids fluttered. It was small, a tiny movement, but everyone saw it. Priya straightened. "Luca," she said, leaning closer. "Hey, Luca, can you hear me?" His lashes trembled again. His forehead creased as he tried to pull himself up from whatever deep place he had been trapped in. His lips parted. A faint, dry sound came out. Priya glanced at the nurse. "Turn the lights up a little." not too bright. The overhead lights shifted from cold white to a softer, warmer tone. The harsh shadows in the room gentled. For the first time that night, the ICU felt less like a battlefield and more like a place of recovery. Luca's head turned slightly toward the sound of Priya's voice. His throat worked as he swallowed. Then, in a small, cracked whisper that made every adult in the room freeze, he said, "Mom, water." Priya's chest tightened. A nurse's hand flew to her own mouth. Even the machine seemed to pause for a second. Outside the glass, the cup in Marco's hand shook so hard that the water inside rippled against the sides. His eyes widened. His face crumpled. He pressed closer to the glass. "Oh my God," he breathed. "Luca." Inside, Priya smiled softly, fighting the emotion building in her own chest. "Hey, buddy," she murmured. "You're awake. That's good. That's really, really good." She turned to the nurse. "Let's get a damp swab for his lips. Small sips only for now." The nurse nodded quickly and moved to follow the order. Marco could not hold back anymore. He turned toward the door, voice shaking. "Can I go in? Please, can I go in?" Priya raised her head and looked at him through the glass. She gave the smallest nod, and the nurse opened the ICU door for him. He stepped inside slowly, as if afraid that moving too fast would shatter the fragile moment. The cup in his hand trembled, water still rippling. His shoes were too loud on the floor to his own ears, and he tried to walk more softly. He reached the bedside and stared. Luca's eyes were half open now, unfocused but aware. His lips were dry and cracked. His chest moved in small, steady breaths. A line ran into his arm, pumps clicked softly, and monitors beeped in a regular, reassuring pattern. "Hey, Marco," whispered, voice broken. "Hey, buddy." Luca's head turned a little more toward the sound. It took effort. His neck muscles trembled, but he did it. "Dad." He breathed, barely audible. Marco's face collapsed completely. Tears spilled over and ran down his cheeks without pause. He set the cup of water down on the small rolling table next to the bed, and the plastic moved just enough for the water inside to quiver again. He took his son's small hand carefully between both of his, afraid to squeeze too hard. His fingers shook around that little hand. He bent down and pressed his forehead to it. "You scared the hell out of me," he whispered, voice shaking with a mix of relief and leftover terror. "Don't ever do that again. You hear me? Do not ever do that again." His shoulders shook as he cried, but this time it was not the cry of a man watching his world fall apart. It was the cry of a man who had just been given something back that he thought he had already lost. In the background, a nurse placed a pre-moistened swab into Priya's gloved hand. Priya gently touched it to Luca's lips. "Here," she said softly, "a little moisture. You asked for water, remember? We have to be careful, but we heard you." Luca's tongue moved weakly. He sighed, the sound small but full. Priya blinked hard. The corners of her eyes burned. A single tear broke free and slid down under her goggles. She sniffed once quickly and lifted her arm to wipe her cheek with the back of her gloved wrist. Althea saw it. The sight tugged at something inside her chest. Priya looked across the bed at her. Their eyes met. "We saved him," Priya said quietly, her voice thick. She reached out with her free hand and gently took Althea's hand in hers, squeezing it firmly. "We actually saved him." Althea felt the warmth of that grip through years of being unseen and unheard. Her throat tightened, and for a moment she could not answer. She only nodded. Then she said softly, "We did what we were supposed to do." Behind them, Benton cleared his throat. They both turned. He stood a few steps away, shoulders rounded, staring at Luca. His eyes were shiny, and his lips pressed together in a thin line. His usual arrogance was gone. He looked like a man who had been hit by something heavy and was still trying to process the impact. He took a slow step forward. "Mr. Valenti," he said quietly. Marco looked up, eyes red and wet. He did not say anything back, but his stare was cold and direct. Benton swallowed. His gaze shifted to Althea. He started, but his voice failed him. He tried again. "I was wrong." The room went silent again. He looked straight at Althea now. His face showed real shame, not the annoyed kind, but the kind that came from understanding just how close he had come to causing permanent harm. "I dismissed you," he said slowly. "I talked down to you. I let my pride blind me. And because of that, I almost missed what was killing him." His voice shook on the last word. "I am sorry." He bowed his head low. Not just a small nod, but a clear, deep gesture of apology and respect. For a long second, nobody moved. Then Althea nodded once. "Crying over it will not help him," she said quietly. There was no cruelty in her tone, only a plain, solid truth. "But learning from it will help the next child." Benton nodded, still looking at the floor. Althea's eyes softened just a little. She let the pause sit, letting everyone feel it. Then she added, "We are here to save lives. That is the only reason any of us should be here." Her words hung in the air, simple and heavy. Marco looked at her over the bed, his expression full of something new, respect, gratitude, and a deep, quiet awe. Priya squeezed her hand again as if to say, "She is right." Outside the ICU, the hallway lights glowed a warmer shade as the night went on. Inside the room, the glass of water on the table sat still, now no longer trembling. Luca's heart kept beating at its new steady pace, and for the first time since this nightmare began, everyone in that room finally allowed themselves to believe they had turned the curve. And for tonight, life had won. 3 days later, the pediatric wing felt like a different world entirely. The tension that had once gripped the ICU had dissolved into something warm, bright, and unmistakably hopeful. Sunlight streamed through the wide hallway windows, spilling across the floors in soft golden streaks. Nurses walked with lighter steps. Residents laughed again. Even the monitors seemed to beep at a more cheerful pace. Luca Valenti was running. Not walking, not sitting, not recovering. Running. His small sneakers squeaked against the polished floor as he darted from one end of the hallway to the other, giggling so loudly that nurses poked their heads out of rooms just to smile at the sound. His cheeks were rosy again. His hair bounced when he turned. His laughter echoed off the walls, full bright alive. Marco jogged behind him, breathless but laughing. "Slow down, buddy. You just scared 10 years off my life. Don't make it 20. Luca spun around, arms wide. "I feel good, Dad. I feel really good." Marco caught him and lifted him high into the air, spinning once. His eyes glistened as he set Luca back down gently. He glanced toward the staff lounge where Althea stood, watching with a soft smile. He mouthed thank you. She nodded, eyes warm behind her glasses. Moments later, the morning grand rounds began. Doctors, residents, nurses, and students filled the auditorium, rows of white coats and scrubs, creating a sea of anticipation. The overhead lights dimmed slightly as Dr. Priya Shah stepped up to the podium. She cleared her throat, adjusted her glasses, and clicked to the first slide on the projector. A title appeared, "Atypical Kawasaki Disease, a case saved by timely recognition." There was a ripple of whispers. Priya continued, "This case nearly ended in tragedy. 12 specialists missed the pattern. All lab results looked normal, symptoms were fragmented, but there was one person, one clinician, who looked at the whole picture." She paused. Then clearly, firmly, she said, "Diagnosis was achieved because of clinical consultant Althea Morgan." The room froze. And then it erupted. Chairs shifted. Hands flew together. People stood. A wave of applause swept through the auditorium, loud, continuous, wholehearted. Even the hospital executives, usually stiff and reserved, stood with the rest. Marco stood in the back, arms crossed over his chest, expression shining with pride. Althea, seated quietly near the side wall, looked down at her hands. Her shoulders lifted with a slow inhale she tried to hide. She had never been applauded by a room of physicians, not once, not in decades of knowing she had skills no one let her use. The applause grew louder. Priya smiled gently at her. "Please stand, Althea." She did. The applause somehow grew even louder. As she stood, she felt the weight of every night spent unseen, every insult absorbed, every moment she swallowed her voice to keep her job. The recognition washed over her slowly, not overpowering, but steady and warm. When she finally sat, a resident behind her leaned forward and whispered, "Ma'am, thank you for teaching us all a lesson." A second resident added, "And for saving that kid's life." Althea only nodded. After the conference, the story broke online. A journalist from a local station had already caught wind of the event. By afternoon, the headline was everywhere: "Hospital Janitor Saves Child's Life After 12 Doctors Miss Diagnosis." Another headline read, "Hidden Genius Woman in Custodial Uniform Identifies Rare Kawasaki Case." And the one Marco personally paid to feature on several platforms, "Never judge by uniform, the woman who saw what others didn't." The comments poured in. "Hire her officially. This is why diversity matters. Medical bias almost killed that child. Give her her license back." Inside the hospital's administrative wing, the board convened. They reviewed the case. They reviewed her background. They reviewed the testimonies of Priya, the residents, and even Benton, who admitted on record that without Althea, the boy might not have survived. A week later, a framed document appeared in the pediatric hallway near the ICU. Beautiful wooden border, glass front, crisp hospital letterhead. It read Appointment Clinical Diagnostic Advisor, Althea Morgan, consulting under departmental supervision. Below it, embossed in raised lettering, in recognition of exceptional diagnostic acumen and demonstrated commitment to patient care. Staff gathered around it. Some admired it quietly. Others took photos. Priya touched the corner of the frame with a soft smile. Benton stood with his hands in his pockets. He murmured, "It's well-deserved." In the middle of that small crowd, Althea stared at the plaque. For a long time she didn't speak. Then her eyes dropped to the 2 ID badges hanging around her neck. One badge Custodial Services, St. Gabriel Medical Center, the other Clinical Diagnostic Advisor. She gently brought the 2 badges together so they touched. Equal weight, equal presence, equal truth. She whispered, "Both of these are who I am. No shame, no hiding, just truth." But the ripple effect didn't end with her. That same afternoon, the hospital released an internal email titled New Initiative, Identifying Hidden Clinical Talent and Addressing Bias in Staffing. It included a detailed new process, a confidential review system for employees with prior medical training, a committee to prevent racial and credential bias training programs on recognizing hidden experts within the workforce. Attached was a flyer for a new CME seminar, Atypical Kawasaki Never Miss the Oscillating Pattern. It included a small note at the bottom, case contribution by Althea Morgan. But the biggest shock came from Marco himself. Standing in the lobby with Luca holding his hand, Marco announced to the press, "I am establishing the Open Doors Fund, a $5 million initiative dedicated to helping minority physicians return to clinical practice. This fund covers exam fees, legal reviews, retraining, and mentorship. No qualified professional should be silenced because of bias." Luca tugged his sleeve. "Dad, does that mean more people like Miss Althea get to be doctors again?" Marco ruffled his hair gently. "Yeah, kid. That's exactly what it means." A reporter asked Mr. Valenti why create this fund. Marco looked at Althea, who stood a few feet away. "Because my son is alive," he said, "thanks to someone the world overlooked." Althea felt her chest tighten, not painfully, but with something deep, something full. She didn't cry, but her eyes glistened. Later that evening, after the cameras, after the emails, after the applause, she went back to her small locker in the custodial room. She hung her coat. She sat on the bench. Then she lifted her stethoscope, the one she had kept all these years, and placed it next to the 2 badges on the same hook. Custodial worker, clinical advisor, a healer who refused to disappear. For the first time in decades, she allowed herself to feel proud, truly proud, because one case didn't just save a child, it changed a hospital. It changed policies. It opened doors for others who had been ignored. It proved that brilliance can't be erased, only buried, waiting for the moment it is needed most. And now, finally, the world was ready to see her, ready to hear her, ready to learn from her. For Althea Morgan, this wasn't just redemption. It was recognition long overdue. 1 month later, the pediatric clinic felt warm in a way hospitals rarely did. Soft light spilled across the waiting area, reflecting off the colorful murals painted on the walls, giraffes, clouds, bright suns drawn by children who had come and healed and left their art behind. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and crayons, an oddly comforting mix. Marco sat with Luca in the corner, both waiting for the follow-up echocardiogram. Luca swung his legs back and forth, tapping his heels lightly against the chair. His cheeks were full of color again, and his eyes were bright with the kind of energy only healthy children have. Every few seconds, he looked up at the clock, impatient, eager, alive. "Dad?" he whispered loudly. "Do you think Dr. Shah is going to poke me again?" Marco chuckled. "She might, buddy, but only a little. And then we get pizza." "Yeah, then we get pizza." The door to the echo room opened and Priya stepped out with a clipboard in hand. Luca hopped to his feet so fast that Marco had to grab his shoulder to steady him. Inside the echo room, the lights were low again. Just like the night everything changed. But today there was no tension in the air, no alarms, no fear. Priya applied the gel, pressed the probe to his chest, and studied the screen with calm eyes. Luca watched her face carefully. "Is it bad?" Priya smiled. "No, sweetheart. It's good. Very good." She clicked a few measurements, zoomed in, nodded again. "Everything looks normal." She turned toward Marco. "Z-score is normal. No dilation left. He's completely recovered." Marco breathed out one long, grateful breath. It came out shaky, full of weight he'd been holding on to since the night the alarm screamed. "Thank you," he said softly. "Thank you again." Priya squeezed his arm once before wiping off the gel. "Take him home. Let him run. Let him play. His heart is perfect." When they stepped outside the echo room, Luca's eyes lit up at the sight he'd been waiting for. Althea stood in the hallway holding a small envelope. Her custodial uniform was neatly pressed, her clinical advisor badge glinting in the overhead lights. Both badges hung from the same clip on her shirt side by side. "Miss Althea Luca," shouted, sprinting toward her. She bent down carefully as he wrapped his arms around her waist. She let out a soft laugh, surprised by the force of his hug. "Well now," she said, patting his back gently, "you look a whole lot better than the last time I saw you." He stepped back and reached into his backpack, pulling out a folded piece of thick paper. "I made you something. At school." Althea blinked. "For me?" "Yeah, open it." She unfolded the page slowly. It was a crayon drawing, shaky lines, bright colors, every inch filled with effort. It showed a woman with silver hair and glasses holding a stethoscope to a big red heart. Above the heart, in uneven handwriting, were the words, "Miss Althea, the heart healer." Her lips parted just slightly. The drawing trembled in her hands. Her chest tightened with a warmth she hadn't felt in years, something delicate, unexpected, and overwhelming all at once. Marco stepped closer. "He worked on that for days," he said quietly. "He said he wanted to draw the person who saved his life." Althea swallowed hard. "It's beautiful, Luca. I love it." Luca grinned proudly. "Do you want to put it up in your office?" She laughed softly. "Sweetheart, I don't have an office." Marco smiled. "You will. Sooner than you think." There was a small pause, warm and comfortable. Then Marco stepped closer, voice dropping into something sincere, something heavy with emotion. "I owe you a life, Althea. A whole life. I don't know how to repay that." Althea shook her head gently. "You don't owe me anything." "Come on," he whispered. "I owe you everything." "No." She looked him straight in the eyes, her voice soft but firm. "If you want to repay me, then keep opening doors for people who never had a chance. For the ones who were overlooked. For the ones nobody listened to." Marco absorbed her words slowly. They hit him with the same quiet force they always carried. "You have my word," he said. Luca tugged her sleeve again. "Miss Althea, I drew the heart big because you fixed mine." Her throat tightened. She rested a gentle hand on the top of his head. "You fixed a lot more than you know." For a long moment, the three of them stood there in the quiet hallway. The man who got his son back, the woman who never stopped believing what she knew, and the little boy who would grow up never doubting what a single voice could change. Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped lower behind the hospital, Althea returned to the small custodial break room. She hung her coat on the hook and placed Luca's drawing beside her locker, smoothing the edges as if it were something fragile. Then she lifted her stethoscope, the same one she had kept hidden for years, and placed it on the hook next to her broom. Side by side, two tools of healing, two identities she no longer had to choose between. She stood there for a moment, letting the warm yellow light settle around her. The badges above her swung gently, custodial services and clinical diagnostic advisor tapping against each other with a soft, rhythmic sound. In the distant hallway, a child laughed Luca's unmistakable laugh. And somewhere outside, faint but steady rain began to fall against the windows, soft and unthreatening, like a reminder of the night everything changed. The narrator's voice closes the moment low and sure. "Do not ask who wears the white coat. Ask who is willing to do what is right when the clock runs down to minutes." The camera lingers 3 seconds on the drawing, a bright red crayon heart and shaky letters spelling Althea. Then the final image settles on the broom and the stethoscope hanging together, bathed in warm light, perfectly still, perfectly symbolic. And the story fades out, not with alarms or chaos, but with the soft sound of a child's laughter blending into the gentle rain. A quiet ending, a full circle promise, and a legacy that will outlive every heartbeat she fought to save.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.